The airport smelled like recycled air and burnt coffee. 14 hours in the sky, cramped between strangers who slept while I stared at the seat in front of me, remembering the shape of a casket disappearing into foreign ground. My wife, buried 10,000 miles from home because that's where she collapsed, where the hospital couldn't save her, where I signed papers in a language I barely understood while my hands shook. I pulled my phone from my pocket as I walked through arrivals. One bag. That's all I had. Everything else stayed behind or got donated to a charity whose name I'd already forgotten. The phone buzzed to life, notifications piling up, none of them about her, none of them asking if I was okay. I opened the family group chat. Mom, Kyle, a few cousins who never responded anyway. I typed, "Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up?" 3 dots appeared immediately. Kyle, "We're busy. Try Uber." I stared at the screen, read it twice, then Mom's message appeared beneath his. "Why didn't you plan better?" Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have typed a dozen things. Could have reminded them where I'd been, what I'd just handled, how I'd texted them 3 days ago about the memorial service and gotten silence. But I didn't. "No worries," I sent back. I walked past families hugging at the barrier, past a father lifting his daughter onto his shoulders, past an elderly couple holding hands like they'd been apart for years instead of hours. Nobody looked at me. Nobody was waiting. The airport cafe had a corner seat near the window where I could watch planes take off. I ordered black coffee I didn't want and sat with my bag between my feet. The TV above the counter showed local news, something about energy grid maintenance, infrastructure concerns, regulatory audits. My field, I designed substations, analyzed load distribution, made sure people's lights stayed on when they flipped a switch. I sipped the coffee. It tasted like nothing. The service replayed in my mind without permission. The weight of the shovel, the sound of dirt hitting wood, the cemetery worker who patted my shoulder and said something kind in Portuguese that I pretended to understand. I'd stood there alone for an hour after everyone else left, just me and a hole in the ground, and the knowledge that nobody from home had bothered to come. Not because they couldn't afford it, because they didn't care. My phone buzzed. A notification from my bank, a reminder about automatic payments, life continuing like nothing had changed. I looked at the group chat again. Kyle had sent a laughing emoji to someone else's message about weekend plans. Mom had liked it. The news cycled back to the energy story. Federal regulators announced surprise audit of regional power infrastructure following anonymous compliance concerns. I finished the coffee and stood. The public transit platform was 2 floors down, 40 minutes to my apartment. I'd take the train like I always did, like I'd been doing since I was 16 and bought my first monthly pass with money from my first job. Self-sufficient. That's what Mom called it when she wanted to sound proud, but really meant she didn't want to help. The train was half empty. I sat near the back and watched the city roll past. All those lit windows, all those people in their homes who had no idea their power stayed on because someone like me made sure the systems didn't fail. Ethan Ward, 28 years old, energy engineer, widower. Nobody came. I waited 3 days before going to Mom's house. 3 days of sitting in my apartment, staring at walls, sleeping in 4-hour chunks that felt more like brief absences than actual rest. I'd brought back small things from overseas, a hand-woven scarf for Mom, some local coffee beans for Kyle, a carved wooden box I'd found in a market the day after the funeral. The house looked the same. Beige siding, black shutters, the mailbox Kyle had backed into last year still slightly crooked. I parked on the street and walked up with the gifts in a cloth bag. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Oh, Ethan, you should have called first." "I texted yesterday," I said. She frowned like she was trying to remember, then shrugged. "Well, come in for a minute. I'm about to head out." The living room hadn't changed either. Same couch, same coffee table with the decorative bowl nobody was allowed to touch, same photos on the mantel, Kyle's college graduation, Mom's 50th birthday party, a few old pictures from when Dad was still around. None of me. I set the bag on the kitchen counter. "Brought you some things, from the trip." She glanced at the bag but didn't open it. "That's nice. You didn't have to spend money, though. I know you're probably tight after. Everything. Everything." She couldn't even say it. "I'm fine," I said. Kyle walked in from the hallway, phone in hand, not looking up. "Oh, hey, the traveler returns. How was the vacation?" I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't a vacation. He finally looked up, smirked. "Right, Sorry, the business trip, whatever you call it. I buried my wife. The room went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Mom cleared her throat. Kyle didn't mean anything by it, Ethan. You know how he jokes. And honestly, you were only married for what, a year? It's not like... 14 months, I said quietly. She waved a hand. You're still young. You'll meet someone else. You're just being too sensitive about all of this. I told Barbara at church that you tend to exaggerate when you're stressed. Kyle snorted. Remember when he cried because we forgot his birthday dinner that one year? I was 12, I said. Still counts. Mom picked up her purse. I really do need to go. Leave the bag there, I'll look through it later. And Ethan? Maybe try to move on a little. All this grief isn't healthy. She walked out. Kyle followed, still on his phone. I heard the garage door open, heard her car start, heard them leave. I stood in the kitchen for 5 minutes. The bag sat on the counter, unopened. Through the window, I could see their backyard. The patio where they had gatherings every few months, the grill Kyle claimed he was an expert at using, the string lights Mom had hung last summer. I left the same way I came in. 2 weeks later, Kyle threw one of his backyard things. Not a party, exactly. Just family and a few neighbors, some beers, some burgers, the kind of casual gathering where everyone stood around and pretended to enjoy small talk. I came because Mom had sent a group message saying, everyone's expected. Not invited? Expected. I brought potato salad I'd made that morning, set it on the folding table with the other dishes. Nobody acknowledged it. Kyle was at the grill, telling some story about work that involved him being smarter than his boss. Mom held court near the patio chairs, describing her latest project at the community center to anyone who'd listen. I stood near the fence with a beer I wasn't drinking, watching. So Ethan, Kyle's friend Jason, asked, what do you do again? Energy engineer. I work on grid infrastructure. Like fixing power lines? Sort of. More like designing and maintaining the systems that distribute electricity to neighborhoods and businesses, making sure the load balance is right, that there aren't vulnerabilities in the supply chain, that... Sounds boring, Jason said, then walked away mid-sentence to grab another beer. I set mine down on the fence post. Mom waved me over. I walked across the yard. Ethan, I was just telling everyone about the new community center initiative. We're renovating the conference hall. Very exciting. Lots of local media coverage planned. That's great, I said. Your brother donated $500 from his bonus. Very generous. I nodded. I suppose you're still recovering financially? I'm fine. Because we'd understand if you can't contribute, given your circumstances. One of her friends, Nora somebody, looked at me with that tilted head expression people make when they pity you. I'm so sorry for your loss, Ethan. Mom jumped in before I could respond. He's handling it. We keep telling him he'll be fine once he stops dwelling. I excused myself to the bathroom. Stayed there for 10 minutes, staring at the decorative towels nobody was allowed to use. The potpourri that had probably been there for 5 years, the framed quote about family being everything. When I came back out, they were laughing about something. Didn't notice me leave. I drove home in silence. My apartment was small. 1 bedroom, kitchen, living room that doubled as an office. The walls were bare except for one photo of her, the one from our wedding where she was laughing at something the photographer said. I sat on the couch and pulled out my phone, scrolled through old messages. Her? You let them walk all over you. Me? They're family. Her? So, that doesn't mean you have to take it. Me? It's easier to just go along. Her? Is it? I'd sent that 2 years ago, before we got married, before she got sick, before everything changed. My work phone buzzed. Voicemail from Marco, my supervisor. Hey, Ethan, it's me. Listen, that report you filed before heading overseas, the one about the redundancy concerns in the South Grid sector, it's getting some attention. Call me when you have a chance. Nothing urgent, just call me. I set the phone down and closed my eyes. The lights were on because I made sure they stayed on. The substation control room hummed with the sound of active systems. Monitors displayed load distribution across 12 sectors. Real-time data flowing in color-coded streams that most people would see as chaos, but I understood as language. The grid was talking. You just had to know how to listen. Marco stood beside me, arms crossed, staring at the same screen I'd been analyzing for the past hour. That's the thing, I said, pointing to a fluctuation pattern in Sector 7. The backup redundancy is routing through an outdated transformer that was supposed to be replaced 2 years ago. If we get a surge during peak hours, we get a blackout, Marco finished, potentially affecting 40,000 homes and businesses. Minimum. He rubbed his face. And you caught this when? 3 months ago, filed the initial report in February. Followed up twice. Never heard back from regional management. They sat on it. Or buried it, I said. Marco looked at me differently then. We'd worked together for 5 years, him as the sector operations manager, me as one of the lead design engineers. He was the kind of guy who said exactly what he meant and expected the same from everyone else. Didn't tolerate politics or ego. That's probably why he'd never been promoted higher. You know what this means, he said. I know what it could mean. The feds are already sniffing around because someone filed an anonymous tip. If they trace it back to this report, your report, there's going to be hell to pay for everyone who ignored it. Good, I said. He gave me a look. You sure about that? I turned back to the monitors. I'm sure. 2 days later, I sat in a lawyer's office downtown. Not a big firm, just a small practice run by a guy named Gerald Ross who specialized in energy sector compliance and regulatory issues. His office smelled like old paper and the kind of coffee that comes from a machine that hasn't been cleaned in months. He read through my documentation while I sat across from him in a chair that squeaked when I moved. This is comprehensive, he said finally. You've got paper trails, email records, analysis reports, follow-up requests. Everything properly dated and documented. I'm thorough. You're covering your ass. Smart. He set the papers down. What do you want from this meeting, Ethan? Clarity. If the federal audit follows the trail I think it will, I want to know what my position is. Legally. You're protected. Whistleblower status, if it comes to that. But there's more here than just professional concerns, isn't there? I didn't answer. He leaned forward. I see your address. Same street as Linda Ward. Your mother? Yes? And I see she's on the community center board, the same center that's been receiving municipal grants for renovations, grants that require certain certifications and approvals from local officials, approvals that sometimes depend on paperwork signed by people like, say, energy engineers confirming residential compliance for zoning purposes. My chest tightened. That was 6 years ago. She asked me to sign something for a neighbor, said it was routine. Was it? I thought back. The forms Mom had shoved at me across her kitchen table, saying it was a favor for someone on the board, that it was just confirming residential status for a property near the center, that I was qualified to sign it as a certified engineer. I'd been 22, fresh out of college, eager to help. I don't know, I said. Gerald folded his hands. Well, if your family understood what you actually control in this situation, what you have access to, what you've documented, I suspect things would be different. But they don't, do they? No? Then I suggest you keep it that way until you decide what you want to do. I left his office with a headache and a new perspective, stopped by Mom's house on the way home, parked across the street, watched through the window as she and Kyle sat at the dinner table, laughing about something. I walked to the door, rang the bell. Mom answered, didn't open it all the way. Ethan, it's late. I need to talk to you about something. Can it wait? We're in the middle of dinner. It's about the funeral expenses. I had to cover everything myself, and I already told you we couldn't afford international travel. We have our own bills. Kyle's voice from behind her. Maybe if you'd married someone with better life insurance. Something in my chest cracked. Not broke, just cracked. A foundation giving way slowly. Right, I said. Never mind. She closed the door before I finished speaking. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, took out my phone, opened the photos from overseas, the cemetery, the flowers I'd bought at a local market, the sunset over the water from her hotel room window the day before she collapsed. Then I opened my work files, found the binder I'd scanned months ago, the one labeled Redundancy Compliance, Ward Revision, my signature, my authority. I drove home, made coffee even though it was 9 at night, sat at my kitchen table and started organizing. If they wanted to treat me like nothing, fine. But nothing had a way of becoming everything when you weren't paying attention. The bank branch was quiet on Tuesday morning. I'd taken the day off work, told Marco I needed to handle some personal business. He didn't ask questions. The manager, a woman named Patricia, who I'd worked with when setting up my accounts 2 years ago, led me to her office and closed the door. So, you're asking about your emergency custodian status? She said, pulling up something on her computer. Confirming it, I said. I know I have it. I need to verify the scope. She scrolled through screens. Right. You're listed as a Level 3 emergency engineering custodian for regional grid assets. That's actually pretty significant. It means in the event of a critical infrastructure failure, you have authorization to make operational decisions regarding power distribution in sectors 5 through 11. Including the south sector? Yes. Why? Just confirming. She printed out the documentation. I folded it carefully and put it in my folder. Next stop was the county records office. Took me 2 hours of waiting and form filling to get certified copies of my marriage certificate, my wife's passing certificate from the Portuguese authorities, and the property records for my apartment. I wasn't sure why I needed the last one yet, but Gerald had suggested I collect everything that proved my legal status and independence. By late afternoon, I was back home, spreading everything across my kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle. Email records from work showing my analysis reports. Responses from management saying they'd look into it. My follow-up emails marked as read, but never answered. The forms Mom had asked me to sign 6 years ago, which I'd kept copies of because that's what you do when you're thorough. The federal guidelines for energy sector compliance that showed what should have happened versus what actually happened. My phone buzzed, the family group chat. Mom. Reminder. Community center event this Saturday. Dress nice, local news will be there. Kyle. Will there be free food? Mom. Kyle. Be serious. This is important for my position on the board. Cousin Jenny. Sounds fun. I stared at the messages. Thought about responding. Decided against it. Instead, I opened my email and wrote to Marco. Need to discuss something confidential. Are you available tomorrow? He responded within minutes. My office, 8 a.m. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Is this Ethan Ward? Yes. This is Rebecca Chen from Channel 7 News. I'm working on a story about the federal energy audit, and I understand you may have information relevant to our investigation. My heart kicked up. How did you get my number? A source in the regulatory office said you filed the initial compliance report. I'd like to interview you, if you're willing. The audit findings are going to be made public this weekend at a community forum. It would be good to have the perspective of the engineer who identified the issues. Where is this forum? Community Center on Maple Street. Saturday afternoon. There will be representatives from the Federal Regulatory Commission, local officials, and media coverage. The same community center. The same event Mom had been talking about. I'll think about it, I said. Please do. This is an important story, Mr. Ward. People deserve to know how close they came to a major infrastructure failure, and they deserve to know who kept it from happening. She hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, listening to the refrigerator hum, the neighbor's TV through the wall, the distant sound of traffic. Mom sent another message to the group chat. So proud of the work we've done at the center. Can't wait for everyone to see it on Saturday. This is going to put us on the map. Kyle. Mom's going to be famous, LOL. I set the phone down, went to my filing cabinet, pulled out the folder I'd been building, added the new documents from today, organized everything chronologically by topic, by level of importance. Then I made a list of who would be at the event on Saturday. Mom, Kyle, the community center board, local officials, news media, federal regulators, everyone who mattered, everyone who'd ignored me. I worked until midnight, preparing, cross-referencing, making sure every claim could be backed up, every document was legitimate, every timeline was accurate. When I finally went to bed, I didn't dream, just slept hard and dreamless until my alarm went off at 6. Marco's office was smaller than mine, which always seemed wrong for someone with his title. But he liked it that way. Said it kept people from hanging around making small talk when they should be working. I closed the door behind me. He was already there, coffee in hand, looking like he'd been up for hours. You sounded serious, he said. I am. I laid out everything. The timeline of my reports, the lack of response from regional management, the federal audit that was now underway, the community forum on Saturday where findings would be presented. And here's the part that gets complicated, I said. My mother is on the board of the community center where this forum is happening. 6 years ago, she asked me to sign some compliance forms for property near the center. I was young, I trusted her, I didn't ask enough questions. I think those forms might be connected to zoning approvals that shouldn't have gone through. Marco was quiet for a long time. You're saying your mother is potentially implicated in this mess? I'm saying there's a connection I didn't see until now, and if the federal audit follows every thread, they're going to find it. And you want to know if you should get ahead of it? I met his eyes. I want to know if I should let them find it. He set his coffee down carefully. That's your mother. She's also someone who told me to plan better when I texted her from an airport after burying my wife alone. Who spent my entire life making me feel like I'm not worth basic human decency. Who uses me when it's convenient and forgets I exist the rest of the time. Marco nodded slowly. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you this. You filed those reports properly. You did your job. If there are consequences for other people because they didn't do theirs, that's on them, not you. And if you decide to cooperate fully with the federal investigation, including providing historical context about how certain paperwork was handled, that's your right as a witness. Even if it hurts my family? Especially then. Because if you protect them, you're still letting them walk all over you, and from what you've told me, you've spent your whole life doing that. I left his office with clarity I hadn't had before. Spent the morning at work, running standard diagnostics, answering emails, pretending everything was normal. But in my head, I was organizing the pieces. During lunch, I drove past Mom's house, saw her car in the driveway, saw Kyle's truck parked behind it. They were probably inside right now, planning for Saturday, excited about the attention the community center would get, completely unaware that the spotlight was about to burn. My phone buzzed. The group chat. Kyle. Ethan, you coming to the thing Saturday, or you too busy being sad? No response from Mom, no correction of his cruelty, just silence that said she agreed. I typed, I'll be there. Kyle, try not to embarrass us. I put the phone away. That evening I loaded my truck with everything I'd prepared. File folders and labeled organizers, printed timelines, highlighted documents, USB drives with backup copies. I'd learned a long time ago that you never trust a single source. Redundancy. That's how you protect what matters. I drove to a storage unit I'd rented that afternoon, paid cash for 6 months, put half of the documents there, kept half at home. If anyone tried to make anything disappear, they'd fail. Then I stopped at a coffee shop and called Rebecca Chen back. I'll do the interview, I said, but only at the forum on Saturday, in person, on camera, where everyone can see. She was quiet for a moment. That's going to be dramatic. Good. Can you give me a preview of what you'll say? No, but I promise it'll be worth covering. Mr. Ward, are you sure about this? Once something goes public, you can't take it back? I thought about the airport, the unopened gifts, the jokes about wasting money on a burial trip. My mother closing the door in my face. I'm sure, I said. Friday night I barely slept, kept going over everything in my head, checking for holes in the logic, weaknesses in the documentation, ways it could be dismissed or ignored. But it was solid. 5 years of professional thoroughness had built something that couldn't be easily dismantled. At 3 a.m, I got up and made coffee, sat at my kitchen table with the photo of her. You were right, I said to the empty room. I should have stopped letting them walk all over me a long time ago. The sun came up slowly. I showered, dressed in one of my work shirts, professional but not fancy, the kind of thing that said I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just stating facts. Loaded the truck one more time, double-checked the folders, made sure my phone was charged. Then I drove to Mom's house, parked across the street, watched through the windows as they got ready for their big day, saw Mom in a new dress, Kyle in a button-down shirt he probably borrowed. They looked happy, confident, completely certain that today would go the way they'd planned. I started the truck and drove toward the community center. The parking lot was already filling up when I arrived. News vans with satellite equipment, official vehicles with government plates, people in suits carrying clipboards. I parked in the back, sat for a minute, breathing slowly. Then I picked up my folders and walked inside. The conference hall was bigger than I expected. Rows of chairs facing a small stage with a podium, tables along the sides with information displays about the center's renovation projects, a banner that said, "Building Our Community's Future." Mom was near the stage talking to a man in an expensive suit. Kyle stood nearby on his phone. Neither of them saw me come in. I found a seat in the middle section, not too close, not too far, right where I'd be visible when the time came. Rebecca Chen spotted me from across the room, gave a small nod. Her camera crew set up nearby. People filtered in, board members, local officials, neighbors, reporters. The room filled with the buzz of conversation, the rustle of programs, the squeak of chairs on polished floors. Mom took the stage first, smiled at the crowd, started talking about community pride, renovation progress, future plans. I listened with the patience of someone who'd been waiting his entire life for this moment. And when the federal regulatory representative stood up to present the audit findings, I stood up too. "Excuse me," I said clearly. "Before you begin, I have something the public needs to hear." Every head turned. Mom's smile froze. Kyle looked up from his phone. Rebecca Chen's camera light turned on. I walked to the front, holding my folders, and the room went completely silent. The regulatory representative was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that had seen every bureaucratic trick in the book. She looked at me, then at Mom, then back at me. And you are? She asked. Ethan Ward. I'm the engineer who filed the initial compliance report that triggered this audit. Mom stood up. Ethan, this isn't the time. Actually, Ms. Ward, it's exactly the time, the regulatory rep said. She gestured to the podium. Please, continue. I set my folders on the table beside the stage, opened the first one. My hands weren't shaking. I'd expected them to be shaking, but they were steady. 3 months ago, I identified a critical failure in the backup redundancy system for Grid Sector 7, I began. A transformer that should have been replaced 2 years ago was still in active service, routing emergency power to approximately 40,000 homes and businesses. If a surge had occurred during peak hours, we would have experienced a cascading blackout affecting the entire South region. I pulled out the first document, held it up so the cameras could see. This is my initial report, filed February 14th of this year. I sent it to regional management with a red flag priority rating. I received an automated response saying it would be reviewed. Next document. This is my follow-up email from March 3rd, marked as read but never answered. Another follow-up on March 20th. Same result. The documentation shows I did everything correctly according to protocol, exactly as my training and certification required. The room was completely silent. I could see Mom's face going pale. Kyle had put his phone down. The federal audit found these same issues because I submitted an anonymous tip after my reports were ignored. What the audit hasn't found yet is why they were ignored. I opened the second folder. 6 years ago, when I was 22 and had just earned my engineering certification, my mother asked me to sign a set of compliance forms. She said it was routine, a favor for someone on the community center board, just confirming residential status for a property near this building. I pulled out the copies I'd kept. These forms certified that the property met residential zoning requirements for proximity to municipal infrastructure. My signature gave official engineering approval, but what I didn't know at the time was that this property was being used to justify grant applications for center renovations, grants that required specific infrastructure guarantees. Rebecca Chen's camera moved closer. The regulatory rep was writing notes. The problem is that I was young and trusting, and I didn't verify the property status independently. I just signed what my mother put in front of me. If anyone examines those forms against actual property records and zoning maps from that period, they'll find discrepancies. Small ones, but enough to question whether the grants were obtained under accurate pretenses. Mom found her voice. This is ridiculous. You're making wild accusations because you're upset about... About what? I turned to her. About you telling me to plan better when I asked for a ride from the airport after burying my wife. About Kyle joking that I wasted money on a burial trip. About you telling people at church that I exaggerate my grief. The room shifted. Uncomfortable murmurs. Someone near the back said Jesus quietly. I turned back to the regulatory rep. But here's the important part. The same regional management team that ignored my safety reports, 3 of them have direct financial ties to community center board members, including my mother. Contract relationships, shared business ventures, mutual investments. It's all documented here. I opened the third folder, the biggest one. Cross-reference timelines showing when my reports were filed, when they were marked as read, and when certain board members had meetings with regional managers. Email metadata. Financial disclosure forms that are public record. Everything that shows a pattern of deliberate suppression to avoid scrutiny that might have affected ongoing projects and grant funding. The regulatory rep stood up. Mr. Ward, I'm going to need copies of all of that documentation. I have 3 complete sets, I said. 1 for you, 1 for the State Attorney General's office, and 1 for media distribution. I handed her the first set. She flipped through it, her expression getting harder with each page. Mom tried to approach the stage. Ethan, please, you don't understand what you're doing. This will ruin... What? Your reputation? Your position? Your comfortable life where you get to treat people like garbage and face no consequences? I looked at her directly for the first time. I spent 14 hours on a plane thinking about how I was coming home to nothing. No wife, no real family, just people who couldn't be bothered to show basic human decency. And I realized something. I don't owe you my silence. I don't owe you my protection. I definitely don't owe you my professional integrity. Kyle finally spoke up. This is insane. You're attacking Mom because you're bitter about your life choices. I laughed, actually laughed. My life choices? I became an engineer. I worked hard. I followed every rule and regulation. I filed reports that could have prevented a disaster. That was my choice. Your choice was to be lazy and cruel and ride her coattails. How's that working out? The regulatory rep was on her phone now, calling someone, probably her office, probably starting a whole new investigation. I picked up the second folder set and walked to Rebecca Chen. Everything I just said is on the record. All documentation is available for verification. I'm willing to provide additional testimony as needed. She took the folder like it was made of gold. This is going to be a major story. I know. I walked back to the podium. The regulatory rep was still on the phone, but she held up a hand to get my attention. Mr. Ward, I need you to stay available for follow-up questions. What you've presented here opens multiple investigation tracks. The suppression of safety reports alone is a federal offense, but if there's financial impropriety tied to grant fraud, we're talking state and federal charges. I understand. I'll cooperate fully. She nodded, spoke into her phone again. Then to the crowd. This forum is now part of an active investigation. Everyone will need to provide contact information before leaving. Board members, please remain available for immediate questioning. Mom sank into a chair. Kyle stood frozen beside her. The man in the expensive suit was already backing toward the exit. Nora, the family friend from Kyle's backyard gathering, stared at me with her mouth open. I gathered my folders, walked down from the stage. People moved out of my way like I was carrying something contagious. As I passed Mom's chair, she grabbed my arm. Why? Why would you do this to your own mother? I stopped, looked at her hand on my sleeve, looked at her face, finally showing something other than cold dismissal. Because you taught me that family means nothing if there's no respect. You proved it every single time you treated me like I didn't matter. So I stopped caring whether I mattered to you, started caring whether I mattered to myself. I pulled my arm free. And for the record, I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself 6 years ago when you used me to sign fraudulent paperwork. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. The community center parking lot had become a circus. 3 more news vans arrived while I was still inside. People clustered in groups, talking in urgent whispers. Officials made phone calls with serious expressions. I walked to my truck without hurrying. Nobody stopped me. A few people stared, but most were too caught up in their own drama to care about the engineer who just torched everything. My phone started buzzing before I reached the vehicle. Marco. I'm watching the live feed, he said when I answered. Holy hell, Ethan. Yeah. Are you okay? I'm fine. The company's going to have questions. Regional management is already calling for emergency meetings. This is going to explode. Let it. He was quiet for a second. You know you just became the most valuable witness in a multi-level investigation, right? And probably the most protected employee in the region. They can't touch you now. Good. You really burned it all down. Some things need to burn, I said. I hung up and got in the truck. Started the engine. The radio came on automatically, some pop song I didn't know. I turned it off and sat in the silence. Through the windshield, I could see people still streaming out of the community center. Mom emerged with Kyle beside her, both of them surrounded by reporters shouting questions. She put her hand up, trying to shield her face. Kyle looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of him. A security officer moved them toward Mom's car. They got in quickly, and she pulled out of the lot faster than was probably safe. I felt nothing. No triumph, no guilt, no relief. Just a kind of hollow space where all the anger had been living for so long. My phone buzzed again, the group chat. Cousin Jenny. What is happening? Someone said Ethan made accusations at the center. Uncle Marcus. Ethan, you need to call me right now. Aunt Patricia. This is so embarrassing for the whole family. I opened the chat, typed one message. I stopped asking for respect. I just started demanding it. Then I left the group, blocked the number, deleted the chat history, gone. Rebecca Chen knocked on my truck window. I rolled it down. That was incredible, she said, but you need to be prepared. This story is going national. The combination of infrastructure safety, government corruption, and grant fraud, that's a perfect storm. You're going to be under a microscope. I have nothing to hide. What about your family? Are you ready for what happens to them? I thought about Mom's face when she realized I wasn't backing down. Kyle's confusion when his jokes suddenly mattered. All those years of dismissal and casual cruelty crystallizing into consequences they couldn't avoid. They should have thought about that before they treated me like trash, I said. She nodded. Fair enough. We're running the story tonight. Full investigation piece. If you need anything, call me. She handed me a business card. I pocketed it and pulled out of the lot. The drive home took 15 minutes, long enough to replay the whole thing in my head. The look on the regulatory rep's face when she realized the scope of it. The moment Mom understood she was caught. The beautiful, terrible silence when everyone realized I wasn't bluffing. My apartment felt different when I walked in. Same space, same furniture, same walls, but lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying extra weight I hadn't noticed until it was gone. I set the remaining folders on my kitchen table, made coffee, sat down and pulled out my laptop. 37 new emails, most from work addresses I didn't recognize, some from media outlets, one from a law firm offering representation if I needed it. I skimmed through them, closed the laptop, drank the coffee. The photo of her was still on the bookshelf, smiling, happy. I picked it up. "I did it," I said. I finally stopped letting them win. The afternoon passed slowly. I half expected someone to show up. Mom trying to plead her case, Kyle making threats, some family member demanding I fix what I'd broken. But nobody came. At 6, I turned on the news. Rebecca Chen's face appeared on screen. Breaking tonight. A federal investigation into energy infrastructure safety has expanded to include allegations of grant fraud and official corruption after an engineer came forward with explosive documentation this afternoon. They showed footage from the community center, me at the podium. Mom's stunned expression. The regulatory rep taking notes. Ethan Ward, a 28-year-old energy engineer, presented evidence suggesting that safety reports about critical infrastructure failures were deliberately suppressed by regional management with financial ties to local board members, including Ward's own mother. They cut to an interview with the regulatory rep. "Mr. Ward's documentation is comprehensive and credible. We're pursuing multiple investigation tracks based on his testimony. This is a serious matter affecting both public safety and public trust." Then back to Rebecca. Ward also revealed that he was unknowingly used to sign falsified compliance forms 6 years ago, forms that may have been used to secure grant funding under false pretenses. Sources say the state attorney general's office is reviewing the case for possible charges. They showed a photo of Mom from the community center website, listed her position on the board, noted that she declined to comment. "This story is developing. We'll continue to follow it as more information becomes available." The segment ended. I turned off the TV. My phone rang. Unknown number. I considered ignoring it, then answered. "Mr. Ward, this is Agent Moreno from the Federal Regulatory Commission. We'd like to schedule a formal interview for Monday. Will you be available?" "Yes." "Thank you. Your cooperation is appreciated. And Mr. Ward, what you did today took courage. Not many people are willing to stand up like that, especially against family." "It wasn't courage," I said. "It was just being done with their garbage." She laughed. "Well, whatever it was, it's going to make a difference. A lot of people are safer tonight because you spoke up. We set a time for Monday." She hung up. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, feeling the weight of the day settle over me. Outside my window, the sun was setting. The lights in the neighboring buildings were coming on, one by one. All that electricity flowing through systems I helped maintain, through infrastructure I helped protect. Nobody knew my name this morning. By tomorrow, thousands would. And Mom? She'd spent her whole life building a reputation in this community, spent years crafting an image of respectability and importance. I'd dismantled it in 20 minutes, not with lies, not with exaggeration, just with the truth she thought I'd never be brave enough to tell. I poured another cup of coffee, opened my laptop, started drafting a detailed timeline for Monday's interview with Agent Moreno. If they were going to investigate, I'd make sure they had everything they needed, because this wasn't just about my family anymore. This was about the 40,000 people who almost lost power because someone's ego was more important than safety. This was about every grant dollar that got approved based on fraudulent paperwork. This was about accountability. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Gerald Ross. Saw the news. Well played. Call me if you need legal advice moving forward. First consultation is free for people who actually have spines." I smiled. Saved the number. The evening stretched out. I made dinner. Watched the story cycle through different news channels. Saw my face, my name, the word whistleblower attached to both. By midnight, it was trending on social media. People I'd never met were arguing about whether I was brave or cruel, whether family loyalty mattered more than truth, whether Mom deserved what was happening. I didn't read the comments, didn't care about strangers' opinions. I'd done what needed doing, and tomorrow I'd do it again if they asked, because respect wasn't something you begged for from people who refused to give it. Respect was something you commanded by refusing to accept anything less. I went to bed at 1 a.m, slept better than I had in months. No nightmares, no grief, no anger, just rest. Sunday morning brought a knock on my door at 8 a.m. I opened it to find Uncle Marcus standing in the hallway, looking 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked to my living room, looked around like he was cataloging everything. Coffee? I offered. No thanks. He turned to face me. Your mother is devastated. Okay. Okay? That's all you have to say? I crossed my arms. What do you want me to say, Marcus? That I'm sorry? I'm not. That I'll take it back? I can't. It's done. She's your mother. And I'm her son. But she never seemed to remember that when it mattered. He rubbed his face. This is going to destroy her. The investigation, the media attention, the legal consequences, she could face charges. Then she shouldn't have committed fraud. You really believe that? That she deliberately did something criminal? I sat down on my couch. I believe she cut corners and manipulated paperwork to get what she wanted, and she used me to do it because I was young and stupid enough to trust her. I believe she spent years treating me like an inconvenience while expecting me to support her whenever she needed something. And I believe that when I came home after burying my wife alone, she told me I should have planned better. So yeah, I believe she brought this on herself. Marcus was quiet. He walked to the window, stared out at nothing. Kyle is talking about lawyers, he said eventually, trying to figure out if you can be sued for defamation. Every word I said was documented and true. Good luck with that. The whole family is falling apart. People are taking sides. Your aunt won't even speak to your mother right now. That's not my problem. He turned around. When did you become so cold? The question hung in the air. I thought about it honestly. I'm not cold, I said. I'm just done. There's a difference. For 28 years, I bent and compromised and stayed quiet because that's what you're supposed to do for family. But family is supposed to work both ways. You don't get to treat someone like garbage and then demand their loyalty when consequences come knocking. She loved you. No, she loved the idea of a son who did what he was told and didn't cause problems. But me, the actual person, she barely knew I existed until I became useful or inconvenient. Marcus looked at me like I was a stranger. I didn't know you felt this way. Because nobody asked. Because it was easier to go along with the fiction that everything was fine. Because the moment I showed any unhappiness, I got told I was too sensitive or exaggerating or making things difficult. So this is revenge? No, this is consequences. There's a difference. He left without saying goodbye. I closed the door and went back to my coffee. The rest of Sunday was quiet. I worked on my timeline for Agent Moreno, organized files, made sure every claim could be backed up with documentation. Professional habits ran deep. Monday morning, I wore a suit. The federal building downtown was all glass and steel, security checkpoints, and ID badges. Agent Moreno met me in the lobby, shook my hand firmly. Thank you for coming in. This way. We went to a conference room on the 4th floor. 2 other agents were there, along with a stenographer and recording equipment. We're going to go through everything methodically, Moreno explained. Your initial reports, the timeline of responses, the connections you've identified, it's going to take a while. I have nowhere else to be. We started at 9, went through lunch, continued into the afternoon. They asked about dates, emails, meetings, conversations, who said what, when, in what context, how I'd identified the patterns, what led me to connect Mom's activities to the suppression of my reports. I answered everything, showed them the documents, explained the technical aspects of grid management so they understood why the safety issues mattered. At 4, Moreno called for a break. You're an extremely credible witness, she said. Everything you've told us matches the documentation. More importantly, we've started pulling additional records and they support your timeline. What happens now? We continue the investigation. Interview management. Interview board members. Review financial records. Build a case. This is going to take months, maybe longer. But based on what you've provided, I'm confident charges will be filed. Against my mother? Among others. Yes. I nodded. Felt nothing. Just acceptance. We finished at 6. I drove home through rush hour traffic, listening to the news. My story was still circulating, but other things had pushed it down the priority list. A political scandal in Washington, a wildfire out west, life moving on while my family's world collapsed. Tuesday, I went back to work. Walked into the substation control room like always. Marco was waiting. You're officially untouchable, he said. Regional management tried to reassign you. Corporate shut it down immediately, said you're under federal protection as a key witness and any retaliation would bring down hell they can't afford. Good to know. Also, you're probably getting promoted. The head office wants you doing comprehensive safety audits for the whole eastern region. They're calling it implementing the ward protocol. I looked at him. They're naming it after me? You identified a systemic failure that could have caused a disaster. You documented it properly. You reported it through correct channels. You refused to let it be buried. That's exactly the kind of professional integrity they want people to emulate. Even though it exposed their own management, especially because of that, the public relations disaster of ignoring you would have been worse than cleaning house. So they're cleaning house and holding you up as the example of how it should have been handled from the start. Wednesday, the local news ran an update. Federal charges were being prepared against 3 regional managers and 2 board members, including my mother. The grants were suspended pending review. The community center renovations were on hold. Thursday, Rebecca Chen interviewed me for a follow-up piece. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Knowing you brought down this entire network of corruption?" I didn't bring it down. They built it themselves. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice. "You've become a symbol for whistleblowers. People are calling you brave." I'm not brave. I'm just tired of pretending dysfunction is normal, because the dysfunctional people are related to me. The interview aired Friday. By Saturday, I'd received 17 job offers from energy companies across the country, 5 speaking invitations from industry conferences, and 3 book deal inquiries. I turned them all down. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to be respected. Sunday, 2 weeks after the community center incident, I drove past Mom's house. There was a "for sale" sign in the yard. I kept driving. 3 weeks after the forum, I got a call from Gerald Ross. "Formal charges are being filed tomorrow," he said. "Your mother, 2 board members, and 4 regional managers. Fraud, misappropriation of grant funds, regulatory violations. The state attorney general is making it a showcase case." "How long before trial?" "Months. But with the evidence, they're all going to plea out. Your mother's lawyer already reached out about a deal." "I don't need to know the details." "Fair enough. But Ethan, you should know that what you did is going to change things. New oversight protocols for grant applications, mandatory third-party verification of technical certifications, strengthened whistleblower protections. Your name is going to be attached to reforms that'll affect how this stuff works nationwide." I looked out my apartment window. The city lights were coming on, same as they did every evening. All that infrastructure. All those people who'd never know how close they came to sitting in the dark. "Good," I said. He hung up. I sat with the news for a while. Mom was going to face consequences. Real ones. Public ones. The kind that couldn't be smiled away or explained as misunderstandings. And I felt fine. Not happy, not sad. Just the settled peace of knowing I'd told the truth and let it do what truth does. The next month passed in a blur of depositions, interviews, and paperwork. I told my story so many times it stopped feeling like my story and started feeling like a case study. The engineer who reported the problem, the son who refused to be complicit. News stories framed it different ways. Some painted me as a hero, others as a cold calculator who destroyed his family for professional gain. A few tried to dig into my personal life, the overseas burial, my wife's passing, looking for drama or vulnerability. I didn't read those pieces, didn't care how strangers tried to understand my choices. At work, I was moved to a new position, lead safety compliance engineer for the Eastern region, my own office. A team of 3 junior engineers reporting to me. Respect built into the job description. Marco stopped by during my first week in the new role. "How's it feel?" he asked. "Quiet. I'm not used to people listening when I talk." He laughed. "Better get used to it. You're the guy who was right when everyone else was wrong. That buys credibility that lasts." "Until the next crisis." "Maybe. But you've proven you won't stay quiet when something needs saying. That's rare. People remember that." 6 weeks in, I got an unexpected visitor at the office. Kyle. He looked rough, thinner, tired. The easy arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like defeat. "Can we talk?" he asked. I led him to my office, closed the door, waited. "Mom's taking a plea deal," he said. 18 months probation, fines, community service. She has to resign from all board positions. Her reputation is finished. "I know." "You knew that would happen when you spoke up?" "Yes." "And you did it anyway?" "Yes." He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "I don't understand you. How can you be so calm about destroying her life?" "I didn't destroy her life. I exposed her choices. There's a difference. She's our mother. And I was her son. But that never seemed to matter when I needed basic decency. So why should it matter now when she needs protection from consequences?" Kyle ran his hands through his hair. "I'm probably going to have to testify. They're looking at my involvement with some of the grant applications. I didn't know they were fraudulent, but I signed things without checking, just like you did 6 years ago. Except I was 22 and trusting. You're in your 30s and lazy, not the same thing. He flinched. Yeah, I guess not. Why are you really here, Kyle? He was quiet for a long time. To see if there's any way to fix this. To get you to, I don't know, say you made mistakes in your documentation. Create reasonable doubt. I laughed. Actually laughed. You want me to commit perjury to save Mom from consequences she earned? I want you to care about family. I do care about family. That's why I'm not willing to watch 40,000 people lose power, because Mom's ego was more important than safety. That's why I'm not willing to let fraud go unchallenged, just because it's inconvenient. Those people, the ones depending on infrastructure to work correctly, they're somebody's family too. Kyle stood up. You've changed. No, I just stopped pretending that being treated like garbage was normal. He left without another word. 2 months after the forum, the plea deals were finalized. Mom got probation, fines, and a permanent ban from serving on any board receiving public funding. 2 of the regional managers lost their licenses. The others took suspensions and demotions. The community center project was restructured with new oversight. The federal guidelines I'd helped identify were being implemented nationwide. Industry journals ran articles about the ward protocol. I was invited to speak at conferences about integrity and engineering. I turned most of them down, but I agreed to one, a regional safety symposium where young engineers would be present. I stood at the podium and told them what nobody had told me when I was starting out. Documentation matters. Following protocol matters. Speaking up matters. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Your job isn't to make people comfortable. It's to make systems safe. Don't ever forget that. They clapped. Some of them looked inspired. A few looked skeptical. I hoped the inspired ones would remember it when it counted. That evening, I drove to the cemetery where I'd have buried her if we'd been home, the one she'd never see. I stood at the entrance and imagined the grave that didn't exist here. I did it, I said to the empty air. I stopped letting them win. I stopped letting them treat me like I was nothing. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere, a bird called out. I hope you're proud. I hope wherever you are, you can see that I finally listened. I stood there for a while longer. Then I got back in my truck and drove home. The apartment was the same, small, quiet, mine. I made dinner, watched the news, saw that my story had finally dropped out of the cycle, replaced by newer scandals and fresher outrage. Good. I was done being a symbol, done being a story. I just wanted to be a person who did his job correctly and refused to be complicit in dysfunction. And somewhere in the city, the lights stayed on because systems worked the way they were supposed to, because someone cared enough to make sure they did. 3 months after everything changed, I sat in my new office reviewing compliance reports from across the eastern region. It was satisfying work, methodical, clear, every safety concern documented, escalated, addressed, no more reports disappearing into bureaucratic black holes. The ward protocol was working. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Ethan Ward? Yes. This is Nora Benson. We met briefly at your brother's gathering a few months back. I'm also on the community center board. Or was. I remembered her. The woman who'd pitied me at the backyard event. Who'd witnessed the final reveal. What can I do for you? I asked. I wanted to apologize. I knew something wasn't right with how your mother handled things. The paperwork, the pressure to rush approvals, the way she manipulated board votes. I suspected but didn't say anything because it was easier to go along. And then I watched you stand up and tell the truth when everyone else stayed silent. Okay. I'm testifying in the civil case, the one the city filed to recover the misappropriated funds. I wanted you to know that there are people who saw what you did as exactly what needed to happen. Not everyone thinks you're the villain here. I don't need validation. I know, but I needed to say it anyway. She hung up. I set the phone down and went back to the reports. That evening, I got an email from Agent Moreno. The case is officially closed from our end. All plea deals finalized, new protocols implemented. Your contribution to this investigation and the resulting reforms has been noted in multiple official reports. Thank you for your integrity. I closed the laptop, looked around my apartment. The photo of her was still on the shelf, but I'd added others. Places I'd been for work, the new office, a picture of the substation control room. Life continuing, moving forward. I didn't hate my family, I just didn't need them anymore. They'd taught me that family was supposed to mean unconditional support, loyalty, protection, but they'd failed to demonstrate any of those things when I needed them, so I'd learned to build my own meaning of family. Professional colleagues who respected my work, people like Marco who valued honesty, systems and protocols that worked because they were designed correctly. That was enough. The next morning, I received a letter on official stationery from the State Engineering Board. Dear Mr. Ward, your actions in identifying and reporting critical infrastructure failures and your subsequent cooperation with federal and state investigations exemplify the highest standards of professional integrity. We are pleased to inform you that you have been nominated for the annual Engineering Excellence Award. I set it on my desk. Might frame it later, might not. What mattered was simple. I'd looked at a situation where everyone else chose silence and comfort, and I'd chosen truth and consequences instead. Not because I was brave, because I was done. Done being the son who took it quietly, done being the engineer whose reports got buried. Done being the person everyone assumed would bend rather than break. I'd broken the pattern, shattered the fiction, exposed the reality they'd worked so hard to hide. Standing in my office, looking out at the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Mom had spent her life building a reputation on appearances and manipulation. I'd built mine on documentation and integrity. Her reputation was ruined. Mine was stronger than ever. The community center forum played in my mind one final time, standing at that podium, holding up the documentation, watching understanding dawn on faces that had dismissed me for so long. The moment they realized I wasn't asking for anything, I was simply stating facts and letting consequences follow. That's what respect looked like when you stopped begging for it. I straightened the files on my desk, checked the time. Almost 6. Tomorrow there would be more reports to review, more systems to verify, more work ensuring that safety wasn't negotiable. But tonight, I was going home to my quiet apartment where nobody demanded anything I wasn't willing to give, where respect was assumed, not begged for, where I was enough, exactly as I was. I turned off the light, locked the office door, and walked toward the elevator. Behind me, the entire eastern region's power grid hummed with activity, stable and secure, because someone had cared enough to do the job right, and nobody could take that away.